guys, welcome back to Your Mindset, Your Power. Let me start with this question today. What's that one thing you have already decided you're just not good at? Sport, a language, an instrument. You expected to be terrible at it. And then one day, you tried it anyway. And you turned out to be better than the story you've been telling yourself. We all have those quiet, invisible ceilings we build over our own heads, right? We decide exactly how far we can go, how much we can handle, where our talent stops, and most of the time, we never once check if we are right. Most people have no idea what their limits are until they test them. I've been there, my friend. And maybe you have as well. So today we are going to talk about those ceilings we built for ourselves and what might happen if we finally found out if they are even real. And here's what I found so interesting about this. Most of us don't walk around consciously deciding, okay, this is going to be one of my limitations. No, right? It happens much more quietly than that. Maybe you tried something once and didn't go well. Maybe something was harder for you than you expected. Or maybe someone told you years ago that you were not good at something, and for whatever reason, you believed them. And little by little, one experience, one circumstance can turn into something you start believing about yourself. I'm not good at this. This is not for me. I could never do that. And after a while, you don't even question it anymore. And I want to say this clearly, my friend. Most limits are beliefs, not facts. And here's what I mean. Let's say you went for a promotion once and you didn't get it. Okay, that's real. That tells you something happened, right? Maybe you were not ready yet, or maybe someone else had more experience, or maybe the timing was just off. That's information. That tells you exactly where you are right now. But somewhere along the way, that one moment turned into something bigger. I'm just not the person who gets promoted. And so you stopped applying. That's not information anymore. That's a decision you made about yourself after one data point, without even testing it again. And those are two very different things, my friend, because how can we really know what we're capable of if we never give ourselves the chance to find out? And sometimes that chance shows up in a way you never expected. Something happens that pushes you to try something you had never considered before, and suddenly you discover a part of yourself you didn't even know was there. That happened to me. And it all started in a gym parking lot. Let me tell you a story. At that time, I was going through perimenopause. And along with all the changes that come with that, those beautiful changes, I started gaining weight in places I had never gained weight before. How much fun, huh? And I had also moved from a warm state to a state where the winters are pretty cold. And little by little, I had stopped exercising completely. I gained 20 pounds in 1 year, my friend. My joints were hurting. And I remember my gynecologist had advised me months earlier to start weight training because maintaining muscle becomes especially important as women go through menopause. And guess what? I completely ignored it until my body started screaming at me. I had never lifted a weight in my life, my friend. At that time, I was driving my son to the gym almost every day. And I would drop him off and I'd sit in the car waiting for him. Until one day, instead of sitting in the car, I made a decision to walk inside. I asked if they had any classes that used weights, and they told me there was a body pump class about to start. Crazy, right? So I walked in very scared and very intimidated. I knew absolutely nothing. I didn't even know which weights to grab. I didn't know the exercises. Everyone around me seemed to know exactly what they were doing. But the instructor and the people in that room were so welcoming, so nice. And even the instructor took the time to guide me. And she said, for this first class, don't use any weights. Just use your body weight. Because if you have never lifted weights before, you will be so sore and I want you to come back. So that's exactly what I did. My first weightlifting class, 0 pounds. Then I went back and eventually I picked up 1 pound. And little by little, I started learning and getting stronger. About a month later, I was squatting with 20 pounds. 6 months later, 40, my friend. And here's the part that matters to me today. When I was sitting in that car waiting for my son, I had absolutely no idea that any of this was in me. I didn't know I would become so much stronger. I didn't know I would ended up loving weightlifting. I didn't know that years later it would still be my favorite workout routine. How could I? I had never given myself the chance to find out before. And I think that's what we sometimes forget about our potential. There are things about ourselves we simply cannot discover from the sidelines, my friend. Sometimes discovering what we are capable of, it starts with simply walking through that door. And this brings me to something else I think is really important. What we focus on can affect what we are willing to explore. We can become so focused on what we can't do, what is not working, or what we are getting wrong, that we give very little attention to what we haven't tried yet. Because if all we are looking for is evidence of where we struggle, we build a pretty convincing case for our limitations. But if you also started asking yourself, what could I learn? What haven't I tried? What else might be possible? That doesn't mean pretending the difficulty isn't there. No, it simply means that you're not allowing the difficulty to be the only information you consider. So maybe sometimes the question you need to ask yourself is, am I looking at a limitation? Or am I looking at something I simply haven't learned how to do yet? Now, does that mean we can all become anything we want? Of course not. We all have different strengths, different abilities, different circumstances, and yeah, sometimes there are real limitations. But that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the limits we put on ourselves before we really know, before we really try. Sometimes we simply assume something is beyond us without even giving ourselves the opportunity to find out. Recognizing a limitation means you tested it. Assuming one means you never did. And I think sometimes we need to leave a little more room for the possibility that we might be capable of more than what we think, right? But here's the question, my friend. How do you know if something is really a limitation if you have never tested it? And that's where curiosity becomes so important. It's about becoming curious enough to find out what might be possible and being willing to learn from what happens. Let's say you have spent years staying quiet in group settings, maybe at work, at parties, even in standing in line somewhere. You let other people start the conversation, always. Instead of accepting that as just who you are, you could start small. The next time you're in one of those situations, start the conversation yourself. Maybe it goes really well. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it feels awkward. Maybe you don't know what to say after 30 seconds, right? But now you know something you didn't know before. Maybe starting the conversation wasn't as difficult as you expected, but keeping it going was. Great. Now you have something specific you can work on. You can learn how to ask maybe better questions. Maybe you can practice listening instead of worrying about what you're going to say next. Or you can try again in another situation. And little by little, you stop deciding this is just who you are. You are actually finding out. And that's the difference here. So, how do you actually start testing your limits on purpose instead of waiting for life to force your hand like it did for me? That's what I want to give you next, my friend. Here's the simple way I walk my clients through it. There are 3 steps to this, and none of them require you to feel ready. Let's go to the step 1. Name it. Not the vague version, the exact sentence. Not, I'm not the person who gets promoted. No, I've only asked for a promotion once and I never asked again. The more specific the sentence, the more specific the test. Let's go to the step 2. Test it. Take that exact sentence and shrink it down to one small action. Not the hardest version, the smallest one you can actually do. So if it's the promotion, maybe it's not asking for the promotion again yet. Maybe it's just telling your manager you want to grow and asking what that will take. You're not trying to prove anything yet, my friend. You're just trying to collect information you don't currently have. Let's go to step number 3. Track it. This is the step almost everyone skips and is the one that actually changes anything. After you do it, write down what actually happened. Not what you were afraid would happen. No, what actually did happen. Because here's what I've learned, both in my own life and with my clients, there is actually a term for this. It's called a mastery experience. It means actually doing something, living it, not just thinking about it, builds more real confidence than anything else does, my friend. More than a pep talk, more than someone telling you, you got this. A small win you actually live through beats any encouragement you could ever hear. And I want to be honest with you about something. Not every test is going to go like my first body pump class did. No, sometimes it just doesn't go well. You have the conversation and it feels awkward the whole time. You finally ask for the promotion and you don't get it. You walk into the room and you still feel out of place, just like you thought you would. And here's what I want you to remember, my friend. That's not failure. You just found out something real. You didn't know it before, and now you do. Maybe you learned the hard part isn't starting the conversation, it's keeping it going. Maybe you learned that asking wasn't as terrifying as you thought it would be, even with a no for answer. Either way, now you know exactly what to work on. Before, you just had fear, maybe a big, blurry kind of fear with no shape to it. Now you have one specific thing, and one specific thing you can actually improve. So you go back, you try again, just with that one thing adjusted. That's the whole cycle here, my friend. Test it, learn something, adjust, and test it again. And I want to be clear about something. Giving up after one hard moment was never really about the moment. No, it's about deciding right there that the ceiling was real before you even gave yourself a real chance to test it. So don't stop at awkward. Don't stop at one no. One uncomfortable moment doesn't get to make that decision for you. So, before we wrap up this conversation, let's make this simple, my friend. 3 steps. That's it. Name it. Say exactly what you believe you can't do. Test it. Take one small action toward it instead of the whole leap. And track it. Write down what actually happened, not what you were afraid would happen. That's it, my friend. 3 steps. So let's go back to where we started. Most people have no idea what their limits are until they test them. I didn't know I was capable of either. Not until I just got out of the car and walked into a room where I felt like I didn't belong. Turns out that ceiling wasn't real. And yours might not be either, my friend. But you won't know until you test it. So this week, I want you to pick one thing. One, I can't. One, I'm not good at this. Name it. Test it. Take one small action toward it. Then write it down what actually happened. 3 small steps, my friend. That's really all it takes to find out what's actually true about you. Thanks so much for spending this time with me today. And if this one meant something to you, share with someone who's been sitting in their own car waiting. Until next week, my dear friend, take care of yourself. Keep moving forward. And remember, your mindset is not just what you think, it's where your power begins. I'll talk to you next week. I love you guys.